I'm Kimberly Frost, 28, and I learned early that in my family, love came with footnotes. Smile, stay quiet, don't ruin the moment. That's why I said yes when I got invited to an engagement dinner that wasn't really about celebrating. It was about proving, in front of a room full of people, who counted and who didn't. I walked into that private dining room thinking I could survive one more night by keeping my head down, laughing at the right times, taking up as little space as possible. Halfway through the meal, my sister stood up and tapped her glass like she owned the air. She smiled first, then sneered and said, "Let's toast the family, except the adopted girl." Everyone laughed. I didn't argue. I didn't storm out. I didn't beg anyone to stop. I just kept eating, slow and steady, like I hadn't been turned into a joke at my own table. Then the waiter placed a bill in front of me. $5,000, and the whole room went quiet in that special way it does when people expect you to fold. I didn't look around for help because I already knew there wouldn't be any. I slid the check back across the table, calm enough to surprise even myself, and said it should go to the person who booked the dinner, to her and her real family. That's when the manager started walking over, and my sister's face drained so fast it was like someone pulled the plug. Before I tell you what he said, and what happened after I walked out, tell me, what time is it for you right now, and where are you watching from? I'm curious to see how far this story will travel. A few hours before that dinner, the night started with a message from my sister popping up on my phone while I was on break at work. She didn't ask if I was free or if I wanted to be there. She just sent the time, the name of the Italian place, and a line about how, of course, I was coming to her engagement dinner. With my family, invitations weren't really invitations. They were orders dressed up as celebrations. I stared at the screen longer than I should have, weighing how much self-respect I was willing to trade for one more night of pretending everything was normal. Saying no would have meant days of guilt calls from my mother and cold silence from my father, so I did what I'd always done. I typed, "Sure, I'll be there," hit send, and tried not to think too hard about it. That evening, I pulled into the cramped parking lot of the little Italian restaurant my sister had picked. From the outside, it looked cozy and harmless, all warm lights and red awnings, the kind of place families go to when they want to feel close. Inside, the host asked for the reservation name, and when I said Frost, he shook his head and pointed to the screen. The booking wasn't under our last name. It was under Jennifer Ray, engagement party. Of course it was. He led me down a narrow hallway toward a private room in the back. Laughter floated through the door before we even reached it, that bright, easy kind of laughter people use when they know they are on the inside of something. I paused for half a second, fixed my expression into something neutral, then walked in like I hadn't already decided exactly where I ranked in this room. My mother, Gail Frost, stood near the head of the table, fussing with centerpieces and napkins, every movement buzzing with nervous pride. My father, Howard Frost, hovered by the wall, hands in his pockets, pretending to study the framed black and white photos while he listened to my sister talk. Jennifer was in the middle of the room, telling a story to a cluster of relatives and friends, her engagement ring catching the light every time she lifted her hand. Her fiancé, Spencer Ray, stood beside her, nodding along, smiling the smooth, practiced smile of a man who already understood the script. Jennifer saw me, offered a quick smile that didn't quite reach her eyes, then turned back to her audience without missing a beat. No hug, no greeting, just a flicker of acknowledgement like I was a late arrival to a meeting she'd already decided was full. I slipped into a chair near the end of the table. There was a place card with my name on it, printed smaller than the others, tucked at the corner like an afterthought. Up close, the seating chart told a story all by itself. Jennifer and Spencer were dead center, flanked by my parents and his parents, then the rest of the family radiated outward. My spot might as well have been labeled overflow. Waiters moved around us, setting down baskets of bread and little plates of olive oil. Conversations overlapped, familiar and easy. People asked Jennifer about wedding dates, venues, colors, honeymoon ideas. Nobody asked where I'd driven in from or how work was going. I smiled when I caught someone's eye, nodded at a few comments, but my presence didn't change the flow of the room. I was a body in a seat, filling space, nothing more. At one point, Jennifer launched into some story about growing up in this town, running around the neighborhood with friends, knowing every family on the block. Half the people at the table laughed and chimed in with their own memories. I listened to them trade stories about a childhood I technically lived through but was never really part of. Part of me wanted to get up and leave before the entrees arrived. I could already feel the first small cuts, the quick jokes about how fancy this was for our family, the casual line about how at least now the Frosts would finally have a real son-in-law, the way my mother's face softened every time she looked at Jennifer. Every tiny detail reminded me that this night wasn't just about celebrating an engagement. It was about making a statement about who counted. Still, I stayed seated. Walking out early would have turned me into the villain of the story they'd tell later. The ungrateful adopted daughter who couldn't even sit through one nice dinner without making it about herself. I folded my napkin across my lap, reached for a piece of bread, and told myself I could survive a few hours of background noise. I had no idea yet how far they were willing to go to prove I didn't belong. By the time the main dishes were set down, the room moved smoothly without needing anything from me. Servers traded empty plates for full ones, refilled wine, and slid out of the way as conversations rolled over them. People had loosened up, leaning back, laughing louder, hands cutting through the air as they talked. My glass of red sat mostly untouched. I kept my fingers around the sweating water glass instead, not because I was worried about drinking too much, but because I needed something steady to hold. Mom had ended up right beside my sister. Every time Jennifer opened her mouth, Mom's face turned toward her like a spotlight, her laugh half a beat too eager. Dad sat close, saying little. But whenever Spencer mentioned our future or the life we're building, Dad's expression softened in quiet approval. I watched it all from my place near the end of the table and felt the same familiar distance settle over me. The talk drifted from wedding venues to honeymoon plans to memories of high school games and old crushes. People threw names around I barely recognized. The sound blurred into one long hum with my sister's voice, always a little clearer than the rest. I cut into my food, chewed, swallowed, nodded when it seemed appropriate. Existing at the edge of the scene had become so normal that most of the time I barely noticed it anymore. Jennifer stood up so suddenly her chair scraped across the floor. The noise at the table dipped, then stalled. She picked up her wine glass and tapped the side with her fork. 3 light, ringing taps that snapped everyone's attention toward her. Even the nearest server paused, still holding a tray. My sister smiled, shoulders squared, eyes a little shiny from the wine and the attention. She took a slow breath like she was stepping onto a stage. "I just want to say something real quick," she said. Her voice carried easily. "Tonight is kind of everything I always pictured. My fiancé, my parents, my family, all in one room." A few people murmured in agreement. She lifted her glass a little higher. "You grow up imagining this table," she went on, "full of the people who share your history, your name, your blood." She let that last word sit there. The ones who were there from the very beginning. Blood. Beginning. The markers of who counted. A couple of relatives shifted in their chairs. One person's eyes flicked toward me, then away fast, like they'd looked somewhere they shouldn't. Jennifer's smile sharpened. "And I'm just really grateful," she said, "that I get to look around and see the real Frost family here with me tonight." That single word "real" landed harder than any insult. There was a thin crackle of polite laughter, the kind people reach for when they sense something mean underneath but don't want to name it. Mom's fingers tightened around her napkin before she forced her face back into something bright. Spencer watched my sister with a small, admiring grin that said he had chosen his side a long time ago. I sat very still. My hand stayed laced in my lap. My heart thudded against my ribs, but my face didn't move. Over the years, I had perfected the skill of shrinking without actually leaving the room. Jennifer finally turned her gaze toward me. She didn't look apologetic. She looked amused, like there was a joke floating between us and I was refusing to play along. Of course, she added lightly, every family has its additions. She rolled the word between her teeth. People who come along later. They're here, they're in the photos. They're technically part of things. It just hits different, you know? Her eyes stayed on mine the whole time. No one asked what she meant. No one told her to stop. Someone down the table let out a short laugh that died too quickly. Another relative rearranged their silverware with intense focus, pretending not to hear. The room didn't disagree with her. It just absorbed the comment and kept holding her up. Heat crept up the back of my neck. I stared at the candle in the middle of the table until it blurred. One part of me wanted to shove my chair back and walk straight out of the private room. Another part, the one trained for years not to ruin special occasions, pinned my legs in place. Jennifer raised her glass higher. "So," she said, as if she had just tied up something harmless, "here's to us, to the ones who actually make this a family." Crystal chimed as glasses knocked together up and down the table. People drank. A few glanced in my direction, then looked away. I didn't move. I didn't pick up my glass. I sat in that chair and let her words pass over me like a wave, feeling the impact but refusing to show it on my face. When the last plates disappeared, the evening shifted from loud celebration to a low, humming calm. Servers moved through the private room with coffee pots and dessert menus. People leaned back in their chairs, talking about early alarms and busy weeks, saying they would be good tomorrow. It felt like the part of the night where nothing big was supposed to happen anymore. My sister sat close to the center of the table, her hand resting lightly on Spencer's arm. Jennifer looked completely in control, laughing easily, tossing out small comments that everyone seemed eager to catch. Now and then, her eyes drifted down the table in my direction, never quite landing, as if checking that I was still exactly where she expected me to be. Conversations at the far end shifted into work talk and promotion gossip. People traded complaints about commutes and bosses, then softened them with jokes. If you only listened to the words, you might think every person at that table carried their world entirely on their own shoulders. I knew how often that weight got shuffled onto whoever stayed quiet the longest. A familiar waiter stepped up beside me, a slim black folder in his hand. "Whenever you are ready," he said, and set it directly in front of my plate. The sound in the room thinned, like someone had turned the volume down. He did not glance around for guidance. The folder landed in front of me with the kind of certainty that said this had been decided already. Across from me, Spencer settled back, one arm draped over his chair, watching. Jennifer's attention sharpened. No one else moved. I kept my hands on the table for a moment, fingers resting on the edge of the cloth. The folder sat between my water glass and my untouched wine like a small, dark boundary. A relative at the far end started to say something about a game on television, then let the sentence die halfway out. Eyes slid toward the check and lingered there. I opened it. The total weighted at the bottom of the bill, printed neatly above the automatic gratuity. It covered the private room, the appetizers, the entrees, the desserts, the champagne to start the night, the wine that kept coming whenever my sister lifted her hand. $5,000. My chest tightened once, then steadied. There was a time when that number would have made me scramble for my wallet. I would have rushed to offer my card just to show I was easy, helpful, grateful to be included at all. I would have told myself that taking the hit was what family did, and that maybe paying for it would earn me a real place at the table. That version of me was gone. From the middle of the table, Jennifer tilted her head, eyes focused on me. "You can handle it," she said, Light and casual, the tone people use when a favor is not really a question. You have the good job now. She did not add the part everyone heard anyway. You owe us. You should be thankful you are here. A small ripple went around the table. A few tight smiles. No one objected. My mother twisted her napkin between her fingers. My father stared at a spot on the far wall, jaw clenched, doing nothing, saying nothing. The message stayed the same as always. This was meant to be mine to absorb. I let the silence stretch until it felt heavy. Then I closed the folder and pushed it across the white tablecloth until it stopped in front of my sister. The leather made a soft scrape against the fabric that sounded louder to me than all the earlier laughter. "You booked the dinner," I said. My voice came out flat and steady. "You and your real family can take care of it." The words landed and did not move. For a moment, the whole table froze. Someone at the end drew in a sharp breath. A chair leg bumped against the wall. The air in the room felt tighter, like the walls had leaned in. I did not look away from Jennifer. Her face lost its practiced ease. The color drained from her cheeks, leaving her features pale and sharp. She looked down at the folder, then back up at me, her hand hovering above the leather without quite touching it, as if contact might make it official. The door to the private room opened with a soft click. A man in a dark jacket stepped inside, posture relaxed, eyes moving in a quick, practiced sweep around the table. The waiter who had dropped the check stood just behind him, hands folded. "I am Mr. Keller, the manager," the man said evenly. "I wanted to make sure everything is all right with the bill tonight." His question hung in the quiet of the room. The room did not answer the manager's question right away. For a beat, nobody moved. The waiter hovered near the door, the folder gone from the table. I kept my hands on the cloth and watched every gaze slide toward my sister. Jennifer reacted first. "It's fine," she said too quickly. A thin laugh slipped out as she pulled the check toward her. Her fingers shook when she cracked the folder open, then snapped it shut again. "The reservation is under your name," the manager said, calm and steady. "We'll place the full amount on your card this evening unless you'd like separate checks." For a second, her face showed what she actually felt, panic and annoyance, before she smoothed it over. She gave a short nod. "That's fine," she managed. Spencer shifted beside her, shoulders tight now. He did not offer to help, did not reach for the folder, just stared at it like the total might shrink. My mother picked up her napkin, twisted it, set it down. My father looked at a point passed to the far wall and kept his jaw clenched. "Thank you," the manager said. "We appreciate you choosing us tonight." He left, and the door clicked shut. Noise in the room thinned. Someone made a weak joke about the dessert. Another guest checked the time and mentioned needing to get up early. People adjusted jackets and reached for bags. Nobody mentioned the bill. Nobody looked toward the end of the table where I sat. When the receipt came back, the waiter slid it to Jennifer. She signed with quick, tight movements and dropped the pen. Her eyes brushed over me once, cold and sharp, like I had pulled a stunt instead of refusing to play the target again. We drifted out of the private room in a crooked line. The main dining area was louder and brighter, full of strangers eating uncomplicated dinners. My parents walked close to Jennifer and Spencer, their shoulders almost touching. I followed a few steps behind, not invited into their little knot. Outside, cars idled along the curb. I heard my name once in my mother's voice, that clipped note she used when she wanted me to circle back and smooth things over. I kept walking. Gravel crunched under my shoes as I unlocked my car and slid into the driver's seat. My phone started buzzing before I left the lot. I let it ring until it stopped. Another call came in as I merged onto the road. I ignored that one too. By the time I parked at my apartment, the screen showed a stack of missed calls from Mom and Jennifer. I carried the phone upstairs without answering. Inside, the apartment felt small but steady. I dropped my keys on the counter, turned on one light above the sink, and waited until my heartbeat matched the quiet. Then I opened the messages. The family group chat sat at the top. Mom had filled it with long blocks of text. She wrote about how beautiful the evening had been, how hard Jennifer had worked to plan everything, how important it was that the night stayed special. Then the tone shifted. She said I had embarrassed my sister in front of everyone, that refusing to help out with the check was selfish and dramatic, that the staff had been uncomfortable and Spencer's parents were shocked. She did not mention the toast. She did not mention the word adopted. More messages followed, telling me not to hold grudges, warning me I was damaging the relationship, reminding me that family comes first. Underneath every sentence sat the same expectation as always. Take the impact so Jennifer doesn't have to. I closed the chat without replying. Below it, a separate thread from my sister waited. Her texts were shorter but sharper. She accused me of trying to make her look irresponsible, of using the bill to get back at her, of choosing the worst possible moment to make a point. Near the end, she wrote that she had gone out of her way for me for years, that without her I wouldn't have been invited to half the things I had acted ungrateful about. I read that line until the words blurred. The old reflex rose automatically. Explain. Soften. Apologize. Promise I never meant to upset anyone. For years, I had done that after every jab. Standing alone in my kitchen, I let the reflex burn out. There was nothing left to fix for people who refused to see what they had done. I locked the phone, set it face down on the counter, and let the apartment stay quiet. No answers for my mother. No answers for my sister. No more stepping in to steady a night they were determined to tilt. That was the last time I let them reach me without my permission. By the time the weather warmed up, everything outside my family felt steady in a way I was not used to. Work picked up first. My days filled with spreadsheets, client calls, and projects that actually moved forward. I stayed late because I wanted to, not because anyone demanded it. My manager started copying me on emails he used to send only to senior staff. I was still the quiet one in most rooms, but that quiet came from focus instead of fear. At home, my life shrank down to simple pieces I could carry. Mornings meant coffee in the same chipped mug and a short walk before work. Evenings meant frozen dinners sometimes, real cooking other nights, a show humming in the background while I folded laundry. My phone lived face down more often than not. The group chat buzzed for a while, my mother's name flashing again and again, but the messages stopped feeling urgent. They became something I could ignore. I did not answer my sister. I did not answer my mother. Their words stacked up in a corner of my inbox and then slipped under work emails and receipts. The space between us stretched week after week until it felt less like a gap and more like a border I controlled. One afternoon, I met a friend for coffee near my office. I grabbed a small table by the window and watched the door until I saw her. Sadie Moran slid into the chair across from me with a tired smile and a huge iced drink in her hand. We had met years ago answering phones for people angry about balances and fees. She had moved to a compliance team at a credit union. I had gone deeper into operations. Somehow, we had kept each other. "How's your week?" she asked, stirring her drink until the ice clinked. "Loud," I said. "Not bad, just full." She nodded. "Mine too. People get strange when money gets tight." She said it lightly, but something in her tone tugged at my attention. Sadie almost never brought specific situations into our conversations. If she mentioned work, it was usually in broad shapes. "Had a wild call the other day," she added. "Couple upset about a restaurant charge, engagement dinner, private room, Italian place on the edge of town. They wanted the credit union to erase it because someone at the table was supposed to cover it and didn't." The back of my neck prickled. She took a sip and went on. They kept repeating how unfair it was, how the staff sprang it on them, how they were embarrassed in front of family. The charge was $5,000. One night. They signed for it. They knew the reservation terms. Now they're trying to make the bank take the hit. The amount sat between us like a stone. I didn't answer right away. Sadie watched my face for a moment, then set her drink down. I only noticed, she said quietly, because the names looked familiar on the account. Frost. Ray. Same spelling as yours. A thin line of cold ran through my chest. In my head, I saw the black folder, the total at the bottom, my sister's hand trembling as she signed. The picture came into focus. Can you even talk about that? I asked. Not in detail, she said, and I won't. I just know they've been late on a few things. The restaurant documented everything. The charge is valid. They are not getting out of it by yelling at people on the phone. She hesitated, then added. There were other notes. Missed payments. A declined deposit for another venue. A lot of blaming whoever picked up the call. I let that settle. It did not feel like victory. I did not feel giddy or pleased. Mostly I felt tired and clear. Sadie leaned forward a little. If you want me to never mention anything with their names again, say it. I don't want this to turn into something that drags you back. It doesn't drag me anywhere, I said. It just explains a lot. She nodded. You don't owe them anything. I wrapped both hands around my cup, feeling the heat move into my fingers. For years, I had twisted myself into whatever shape kept the peace. I had paid, stayed quiet, absorbed careless comments, and told myself it was easier than pushing back. Sitting across from Sadie in that cramped cafe, I understood I did not have to do that anymore. Their money problems were theirs. Their arguments with banks and managers and venues were theirs. Their version of the story could spin as wildly as they wanted. I did not have to steady it. For the first time, the distance between my life and theirs did not feel like a loss. It felt like a decision. By the time the weather cooled, the quiet around me felt less like a pause and more like the way my life was meant to sound. Work took up most of my days. I was leading projects instead of hiding at the back of meetings, going home tired from effort instead of from pretending. Evenings were simple. I cooked for one, walked my neighborhood, watched shows I actually liked. My phone lived on the counter instead of in my hand. The space between me and my family stopped feeling like an argument I had to rehearse and became a line I did not cross. For the first time, my mood rose and fell with my own choices, not with whatever was happening in someone else's dining room. My mother's calls still came. Her name would light up the screen, sit there, fade, and most days I let it ring out. One afternoon I answered. Her voice sounded thin and tight, like she had been talking in circles for weeks. She asked how I was, then moved straight into what she really wanted to say. Deposits behind on venues, a place threatening to cancel their date, a letter from a collection agency about a balance she thought would quietly disappear. She used words like humiliating and unfair, and said people were twisting the story, that no one understood how much pressure Jennifer was under. She never mentioned that night at the restaurant. She did not say the word adopted once. For the first time, I did not rush to comfort her. I let the silence sit until she ran out of complaints. Then she asked if I would call Jennifer, help her see reason, maybe talk to someone on the financial side since I understood how those systems worked. She framed it as a chance to fix things, as if my distance were the real problem. I told her I hoped she found some peace, and that I would not be getting involved, not now or later. I said I needed distance from her, from my father, from my sister, and that this time it was permanent. She reached for the old lines about family fighting and getting over it. I told her this was not a fight. It was a pattern, and I had finally stepped out of it. We ended the call without shouting. When I set the phone down, I waited for the usual flood of guilt and second-guessing. It never showed up. What I felt instead was something simple and solid, like a floor under my feet I had finally decided to stand on. A few days later, an email from Jennifer appeared in my inbox. The subject line used my name like an exclamation. Inside, she wrote about stress and pressure, and how hard she had tried to make everything perfect. She said people were judging her without knowing the full story. Near the bottom, there was one sentence about how families should support each other when things get hard. There was no apology, no mention of any line crossed with me. I read it once and let it sit there, unanswered. Not long after that, I started seeing a therapist. In a quiet office that held no history of my family, I finally said certain things out loud. Birthdays where I felt like a guest, holidays at the edge of the frame, years of being told I was lucky to be there at all. Naming it did not change what they had done, but it changed how much of it I agreed to carry. Bits of news about Jennifer and Spencer still reached me through cousins. The big wedding became something smaller, and vendors started demanding payment in full. Money turned tense at gatherings, the kind of topic that stiffens shoulders even while people smile for photos. None of that surprised me. People who spend their lives shifting consequences onto someone else are always shocked the first time no one steps forward. I did not celebrate their stress, and I did not step in. Their bills and calls with banks stayed theirs. For once, the fallout stayed with the people who caused it while my life went on without them. I was no longer the built-in safety net or the quiet extra. My money went to my rent and my savings. My time went to people who did not need me to shrink. My peace no longer depended on a seat at a table that had never truly been mine. If there is a lesson in this, it is that loyalty without respect will wear you down until you forget you have a choice. Sharing a last name does not give anyone the right to treat you as less, or to send the cost of their decisions your way and call it love. I did not get a dramatic ending where everyone admitted they were wrong. I got a life that belongs to me, built on my work, my choices, and my boundaries. And that has been enough. Thank you for listening to my story. If it made you think differently about your own boundaries or your idea of family, you can share that, or simply carry it with you the next time someone expects you to pay for their comfort.